Act 1, Aeliana, Chapter 1. The Guardian's Fall. The crystal spires of the ancient elven boundary shrine crackled with destructive energy as Aeliana Vale faced down Ultranacius Eternus. For 7 days and nights they had battled across 3 realms, a chase that had left devastation in its wake. Now, at this sacred nexus point, the Guardian had finally cornered her prey. "Your corruption ends here," Aeliana declared, her voice steady despite the exhaustion threatening to overwhelm her. Her platinum hair whipped around her face as winds of conflicting magic churned through the shrine. The runes on her robes glowed with protective enchantments, though several had already burned out from the intensity of their battle. Ultranacius laughed, the sound no longer human but a discordant echo that seemed to come from everywhere at once. His form had changed since their first encounter. Where once stood a man now loomed a towering figure of shadow and bone, wreathed in corrupt magic that ate away at the very air around him. "You're too late, Guardian," he rasped. "I've tasted the power of 7 realms. Soon I'll devour them all." Aeliana's piercing blue eyes narrowed as she raised her staff. The crystal inlays pulsed with stored power, energy she had been conserving for this precise moment. "The Guardians have maintained balance for millennia," she said. "You are not the first power-hungry fool I've faced, nor will you be the last." Ultranacius snarled and unleashed a torrent of dark energy. The attack struck Aeliana's defensive barrier with such force that one of the shrine's crystal spires shattered, raining fragments across the ancient stonework. Aeliana staggered but held her ground. Blood trickled from her nose, a sign of magical overexertion. She couldn't maintain this level of defense much longer. "You cannot stop what I've become," Ultranacius taunted, circling her. "The Order of the Grey feared their own potential. I embrace it." "The Order was right to fear it," Aeliana countered, subtly shifting her stance to align with the boundary stones beneath her feet. "Some knowledge is forbidden because it corrupts absolutely." With a swift motion, she slammed her staff into the center stone. The entire floor of the shrine illuminated, revealing an intricate pattern of runes that had lain dormant for centuries. Ultranacius howled as he recognized the ancient banishment circle. "No!" he roared, lunging toward her with terrifying speed. Aeliana began the incantation, her voice resonating with power as she spoke words in the ancient elven tongue. The boundary stones responded, vibrating with increasing intensity. A column of light erupted around Ultranacius, halting his advance. "I bind you to your realm, Eternus," she declared, "by the oath of the Guardians and the ancient pact of the realms." Ultranacius thrashed against the magical barrier, his form distorting as the banishment began to take effect. But rather than submit, he drove his clawed hands into the boundary circle, tearing at the very fabric of reality. "If I am bound, Guardian," he snarled, "then you will pay the price." Pain shot through Aeliana as she felt the spell destabilize. The banishment required precise balance, a balance Ultranacius was deliberately disrupting. She poured more of her own energy into maintaining the circle, but the strain was overwhelming. "You forget," he hissed. "I studied the forbidden texts. I know the cost of such magic." With a terrible cry, Ultranacius drove his essence into the boundary stones. The banishment circle flared blindingly bright as it began to fracture. Aeliana felt her control slipping as the magic turned volatile and unpredictable. "Return to Atherin," she commanded, summoning the last reserves of her strength. The boundary stones cracked, and reality itself seemed to split open. Ultranacius was indeed being pulled back to his realm, but the backlash of energy had created a cascading failure in the shrine's ancient magic. As Ultranacius vanished, dragged back to Atherin, his final attack struck Aeliana directly. Pain exploded through her body as the boundary circle collapsed completely. The nexus point between realms became unstable, creating a maelstrom of portals that tore open and closed in rapid succession. Aeliana struggled to maintain her footing as the shrine began to collapse around her. She had succeeded in forcing Ultranacius back to his realm, but the cost was higher than she had anticipated. The boundary was damaged, and the Guardian herself was grievously wounded. A swirling vortex opened beneath her feet, not the carefully controlled portal she would have created, but a raw tear in reality. As she fell through it, consciousness beginning to fade, Aeliana clutched her staff tightly. Her last thought before the darkness claimed her was that Ultranacius would not remain bound for long. The banishment was incomplete, rushed by necessity. She tumbled through the void between realms, magic and blood leaking from her wounds, until finally she crashed onto the cold earth of a foreign world, a realm known as Earth, far from the elven spires of Alfheim, and the magical resources she would need to return home. As rain began to fall on her wounded form, Aeliana Vale, guardian of the realms, lay broken and alone in a world that had no knowledge of the cosmic battle that had just been fought, or of the greater threat that would soon follow. Chapter 2. The Unlikely Saviour. Commander Dave Gunner. White pulled his truck off the unmarked Forest Service road, cutting the engine under the cover of towering pines. The coordinates had led him to this remote section of the national forest miles from the nearest hiking trail or campsite. He checked his cell phone, no signal as expected in these mountains. He grabbed his pack and strapped his sidearm to his hip, an instinctive motion after decades in the field. The forest was silent except for the occasional call of birds and the whisper of wind through the trees. Perfect cover, but also perfect isolation. 3 weeks ago, a government research station 20 miles north had reported anomalous energy readings, spikes that defied explanation and fried half their monitoring equipment. A week later, hikers reported strange lights in the sky and unexplained electromagnetic disturbances that killed cell phones and GPS units. Then locals began talking about strange sounds emanating from the deep woods at night, sounds that made their dogs howl and their children wake screaming. The agency had classified it as a potential domestic terror threat, perhaps a group testing experimental EMP weapons or radiation devices. But Gunner wasn't convinced. He'd seen enough in Afghanistan and elsewhere to know when something didn't fit the standard profile. "This isn't terrorists," he had told his superiors bluntly. "No chatter, no pattern, no purpose." They'd sent him anyway. As a field commander with 20 years' experience, Gunner was used to being deployed to check out the strange and unexplained before larger teams were committed. Usually there was a logical explanation: drug operations, weapons caches, occasionally foreign intelligence gathering. But something about this felt different. Gunner moved through the forest with practiced silence, his senses alert to every sound and movement. He'd set up his cabin, an agency safehouse, 3 days ago as his base of operations. So far, his sweeps had revealed nothing unusual, but the strange energy signatures continued to appear on his portable scanner. Always moving, always elusive. Tonight was different. The readings were stronger, more focused. Something had changed in the pattern. As he crested a small ridge, Gunner felt it. A pressure in the air, a static charge that made the hairs on his arms stand on end. His scanner emitted a high-pitched whine as the needle jumped into the red zone. Whatever he was tracking, it was close. Then came the light, a sudden brilliant flash that illuminated the forest like daybreak, followed by a sound like reality itself tearing open. Gunner instinctively dropped to a crouch, drawing his weapon as the light faded to a pulsing glow through the trees ahead. Training told him to call for backup. Experience told him there wasn't time. He advanced cautiously toward the source of the light, moving from tree to tree, scanner forgotten in his pocket. The glow was fading now, but it had a quality to it he'd never seen before. Not quite like fire, not quite like electricity, something altogether different. As he reached the edge of a small clearing, Gunner saw her. The woman, if that's what she was, lay crumpled on the forest floor, her silver-white hair spread around her like spilled moonlight. Her clothing was unlike anything he'd ever seen, intricately designed with patterns that seemed to shift when he wasn't looking directly at them. Beside her lay what appeared to be a staff of some kind, still faintly glowing with the same strange energy that had registered on his scanner. Years of combat had taught Gunnar to assess threats in an instant. This woman was clearly injured, blood seeping through her robes in several places. Her breathing was shallow and laboured. Whatever or whoever she wasn't a threat, at least not in her current state. More importantly, she needed help. Gunnar holstered his weapon and stepped into the clearing. As he approached, her eyes fluttered open, eyes of such an intense blue they seemed to glow from within. For a moment they locked gazes, and Gunnar felt something he hadn't experienced in a very long time. Surprise. "Don't move," he said softly, crouching down beside her. "I'm here to help." Her expression remained guarded, wary, but there was also recognition there, not of him specifically, but of his intent. She was too weak to resist as he carefully assessed her injuries. Several deep lacerations, burns unlike any he'd seen before, and what appeared to be complete magical exhaustion. Though that last part was something Gunnar had no frame of reference for. He gently lifted her, surprised at how light she felt despite her tall frame. The staff seemed important to her. Her fingers had been tightly wrapped around it even in her semi-conscious state, so he made sure to bring it along. As he carried her back through the darkening forest toward his cabin, Gunnar knew his mission had just become significantly more complicated. The strange phenomena he'd been sent to investigate apparently had a source, and she was now cradled in his arms. The agency would want to know. They'd want to take her, study her, interrogate her. Protocol dictated he report this immediately. Instead, Gunnar adjusted his grip on the mysterious woman and continued towards the cabin, his satellite phone remaining untouched in his pocket. Some instinct, honed through years of making life-or-death decisions, told him that this wasn't something the agency should handle, at least not yet. Not until he understood what exactly had fallen from the sky into his forest. For now, she needed healing and safety. The rest could wait. Chapter 3. The Healing. For 3 days, Aeliana drifted between consciousness and fevered dreams. In her more lucid moments, she recognized the wooden beams of an unfamiliar ceiling, felt the warmth of a fire, and sensed the presence of the human who had found her in the forest. Gunnar had converted his small dining table into a makeshift medical station. The woman's wounds defied conventional treatment. The burns seemed to shimmer with residual energy, and the lacerations closed, then reopened as if fighting against healing. After his first attempts at standard field medicine proved inadequate, he'd settled for keeping her comfortable and hydrated, changing bandages that glowed faintly in the dark, and maintaining a constant vigil. On the evening of the second day, his satellite phone rang. He stepped outside to answer it. "Report, Commander White," came the clipped voice of Director Harlow. "Still investigating the anomalies," Gunnar replied, his eyes fixed on the cabin door. "Nothing conclusive yet. The energy signatures have stopped, completely, after 3 weeks of increasing activity." Gunnar's jaw tightened. He knew exactly why they'd stopped. She was lying on his table inside, the source of whatever had been happening in these woods. "I need more time," he said finally. "The agency is considering sending a full research team." "No." The word came out sharper than intended. "There's delicate work here. A team would contaminate the site. Give me 1 more week." A long pause followed. 3 days, Commander. Then I want concrete findings." Gunnar ended the call and returned inside. In the firelight, his unexpected guest looked almost peaceful, though her breathing remained shallow. He checked her pulse, steady but with an unusual rhythm, like hearing music in a time signature he couldn't quite identify. "Who are you?" he murmured, not expecting an answer. To his surprise, her eyelids fluttered open. Those piercing blue eyes found his, clearer than they had been in the forest. "I am," she began, her voice barely a whisper, "Aeliana Vale." Gunnar moved closer. I'm Dave White. People call me Gunner. He offered her water, which she accepted with shaking hands. You're safe here. This realm? She managed before a coughing fit overtook her. Don't try to talk yet, he said, easing her back down. Whatever happened to you, it was serious. Some of these wounds. He gestured to the strange burns on her arms. Aeliana glanced down at her injuries, a flash of recognition in her eyes. Dark magic, she whispered. Corrupted. Gunnar had seen many things in his life, war, violence, the darkest aspects of humanity, but magic wasn't among them. Yet something about the conviction in her voice made dismissing her impossible. The scanner readings, the light in the forest, her otherworldly appearance. There was no conventional explanation. The staff, she suddenly said with more strength, trying to sit up. My staff. It's here, he assured her, retrieving it from beside the hearth where he'd placed it. The crystal inlays no longer glowed as they had in the forest, but they still caught the firelight in ways that seemed impossible, reflecting colours that weren't present in the room. Relief visibly washed over her as her fingers closed around it. The moment she touched the staff, the strange burns on her arms seemed to calm, the angry red fading slightly. Thank you, she said, meeting his eyes directly for the first time. Not many would help a stranger from another realm. Gunnar pulled up a chair beside her. 20 years of military experience had taught him to adapt quickly to changing situations. If magic and other realms were suddenly part of his reality, he would process that accordingly. Where exactly are you from? He asked, keeping his voice neutral, non-threatening. Alfheim, she replied, her eyes watching him carefully for his reaction. I am a guardian. I protect the boundaries between realms and maintain the balance of power. Gunnar nodded slowly, as if she'd just told him she was from Canada. And something broke that balance. A shadow crossed her face. Someone. Ultranacious Eternus. He dot. Her voice faltered, exhaustion claiming her again. Rest, Gunnar said, standing. We can talk tomorrow. As he turned to go, her hand caught his wrist with surprising strength. You didn't report me, she said. It wasn't a question. Gunnar met her gaze steadily. No. Why? He considered this for a long moment. Because some situations required judgment, not protocol. Something shifted in her expression. Recognition, perhaps. The Guardian and the Commander both bound by duty, but capable of making difficult decisions when necessary. He gently withdrew from her grasp, and she allowed her arm to fall back to the table, her eyes already closing from exhaustion. Throughout the night, Gunnar maintained his vigil. Twice, Aeliana's wounds began to glow with an ominous purple light, and she thrashed in apparent pain. Each time, he placed her staff in her hands, and the light receded. Whatever connection existed between her and that artifact, it was clearly helping her heal. By the third day, Aeliana was able to sit up. The worst of her wounds had closed, though the strange burns left intricate silver-lined scars unlike anything Gunnar had seen before. She accepted the simple stew he offered, eating it carefully while studying the cabin with quiet curiosity. Your dwelling is defensible, she commented, noting the reinforced windows and strategic layout. Gunnar's lip quirked in what might have been the ghost of a smile. Force of habit. You are a warrior in your realm. He stirred the fire. Something like that. I lead a team that handles threats. As do I, she said softly. They fell into a comfortable silence, each recognizing in the other a kindred spirit, someone who understood responsibility, command, and the weight of protecting others. It wasn't friendship yet, but it was understanding, and in their respective worlds that was far more valuable. That evening, as Aeliana rested near the fire with her strength slowly returning, Gunnar sat cleaning his sidearm, a ritual that helped him think. The energies I was tracking in these woods, he said without looking up, that was you arriving. Aeliana nodded. The boundary between our realms was damaged during my confrontation with Ultranacious. The energy would have been volatile. And before that, there were anomalies for weeks. Her expression darkened. His influence spreading, testing the boundaries. That is why I confronted him. Guardians only intervene when threats extend beyond their realm of origin. Gunnar set down his weapon, fully attentive now. Is he still a threat? Yes, she said simply. The banishment was incomplete. I succeeded in forcing him back to Atherin, but the seal is weakening. Without the proper rituals and strength, I could not complete the binding. How long? Days, perhaps weeks. He will recover his strength, as I am recovering mine. Then he will try again. Gunnar processed this, his tactical mind already considering implications. And you need to get back to your realm. Yes, but not only to return home, to prepare for his next assault, to complete what I started. For the first time in his long career, Gunnar faced something well beyond his training. Terrorists, hostile nations, even natural disasters had protocols. Interdimensional threats, and elfin guardians did not. Yet the core elements remained the same. Identify the threat, protect the innocent, neutralize the danger. Rest tonight, he said, his decision made. Tomorrow we figure out how to get you home. Aeliana studied him, her ancient eyes seeming to look through him, assessing his resolve. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her because she nodded once, a gesture of respect between equals. We have much to discuss, Commander White, she said formally. Gunnar, he corrected. Just Gunnar. Gunnar, she repeated, the name sounding different in her melodic accent. We have much to discuss. As night settled fully over the forest, they remained by the fire, two warriors from different worlds, each carrying the weight of responsibility, each recognizing in the other a rare and precious quality, unwavering dedication to their duty, regardless of the cost. And perhaps, though neither would have admitted it yet, something more. Chapter 4. A Bond and a Locket. Dawn broke over the forest, painting the cabin in soft golden light. Aeliana stood by the window, her tall figure silhouetted against the morning sun. Her strength had largely returned, though the silvery scars from Ultranacious's dark magic would remain, permanent reminders of their confrontation. Gunnar watched her from the doorway, coffee in hand. Over the past week, he'd observed her transformation from a wounded stranger to something else entirely, a powerful being whose quiet dignity commanded respect. Her recovery had been remarkable, aided by whatever magic flowed through her staff and her own remarkable resilience. The boundary thins today, she said without turning. I can feel Alfheim calling. Gunnar nodded, though she couldn't see it. In their time together, he'd learned to trust her sensitivity to things he couldn't perceive. You're leaving, then. Now she turned, those piercing blue eyes meeting his. I must. Every moment I remain, Ultranacious grows stronger. He understood duty. It was the foundation of his entire life. Duty to country, to his team, to the mission. He'd never questioned its weight until now. I still haven't filed my report, he said, moving to stand beside her at the window. As far as the agency knows, I found nothing in these woods. Aeliana studied him. You compromised your mission for me. I adjusted to new information, he corrected, the hint of a smile touching his lips. That's what makes a good commander. Her expression softened slightly. Indeed. They stood in comfortable silence, watching a deer and her fawn emerge from the trees to graze in the morning light. They'd spent hours like this, quiet moments between her healing sessions and his perimeter checks, between her explanations of cosmic forces and his recounting of earthly conflicts. Different worlds, similar burdens. I failed, she said suddenly, her voice low. The binding was incomplete. Ultranacious will break free, and the realms will face his wrath again. Gunnar shook his head. You survived. You'll finish what you started. Such confidence, she said. a rare hint of warmth in her voice. "I've seen enough combat to know when someone has the resolve to see a mission through," he replied. "You do." Aeliana turned to face him fully. "You understand what few in your realm could. The weight of command, the cost of protecting others." He met her gaze. "Duty isn't unique to elves." "No," she agreed. "It seems some qualities transcend realms." The morning progressed as Aeliana prepared for her departure. She had explained that the boundary between worlds would be thinnest at noon, allowing her to create a stable portal back to Alfheim. Gunnar helped her gather what little she needed: her now restored staff, a small bag of herbs she'd collected from the forest, and the tattered remnants of her ceremonial robes, which she refused to leave behind despite their damaged state. "For the archivists," she explained when he questioned it, "every encounter between realms must be documented." "Will they document me?" he asked, only half joking. She paused her preparations, considering him seriously. "Yes, the human who aided a guardian when he had no obligation to do so, who kept her safe when he could have exploited her weakness, who listened when he could have dismissed." Gunnar looked away, uncomfortable with the assessment. "I just did what needed doing." "That," she said quietly, "is precisely why it matters." As the sun approached its zenith, they walked together to a small clearing near where they had first met. Aeliana had identified it as a natural convergence point between realms, a place where the barrier was already thin. Standing at the center of the clearing, she turned to face him. For a moment, she looked as she must in her own realm, regal, powerful, timeless. Then something shifted in her expression, and he saw uncertainty there. "In all my century as Guardian," she began, her voice more hesitant than he had heard before, "I have rarely encountered beings from other realms who—" She paused, searching for the right words. "Who challenged my understanding." Gunnar waited, sensing she needed to say this in her own way. "Guardians are taught that humans are unpredictable, chaotic, bound to their short lives and immediate concerns," she continued. "We are discouraged from forming attachments in other realms. It complicates our duty." "Makes sense," he said simply. "Attachment changes priorities." "Yes," she agreed, studying him with those ancient eyes. "And yet sometimes attachment forms regardless of wisdom or caution." She reached into her robes and drew out a small object, a locket of intricately carved silver hanging from a delicate chain. As she held it in her palm, it caught the sunlight and seemed to glow with an inner light of its own. "This was given to me by my predecessor," she said. "It is an artifact of my people, crafted long ago when the boundaries between realms were less defined. It maintains a connection, regardless of distance or dimension." Gunnar looked at the small silver locket, understanding its significance. "That's not something you give away lightly." "No," she agreed softly. "It is not." She held it out to him, the locket dangling between them, catching the light in impossible ways. "This is for you. It will allow you to reach me no matter where I am. Just hold it and speak my name." He hesitated. "You're breaking protocol for me." The corner of her mouth lifted in the closest thing to a smile he had yet seen from her. "As you did for me." Slowly, he extended his hand and she placed the locket in his palm. The metal was warm, almost alive against his skin. "Only a few know my true name," she continued, her voice low. "Use it only when necessary." She leaned closer, her lips near his ear, and whispered 3 syllables, her true elven name, a sound that seemed to vibrate in the air between them. Gunnar closed his fingers around the locket, feeling its subtle pulse against his skin. "I'll keep it safe." "I know you will," she said, and in those 4 simple words lay a trust that transcended their short time together, a recognition that some bonds form not through years, but through shared purpose, mutual respect, and the rare understanding that comes when 2 souls recognize something of themselves in another. She stepped back to the center of the clearing, raising her staff. The crystal inlays began to glow with increasing intensity, responding to her restored power. "Stand back," she warned, her voice taking on a resonant quality that seemed to echo from somewhere beyond. Gunnar retreated to the edge of the clearing as Aeliana began to trace intricate patterns in the air with her staff. Each movement left trails of shimmering light hanging suspended before her. The air temperature dropped suddenly, and the wind picked up, swirling around her in a tight spiral. With a final, decisive movement, she thrust her staff forward into the center of the pattern she had woven in the air. There was a sound like crystal shattering, though nothing visible broke. Instead, the space before her began to distort and fold in on itself, tearing open to reveal a swirling vortex of blues and silvers. A portal to Alfheim. Through the opening, Gunnar caught glimpses of towering crystalline spires and ancient trees with silver leaves. A world as beautiful as it was alien. The portal's edges fluctuated, indicating it wouldn't remain stable for long. Aeliana turned to him one last time, the light of the portal illuminating her features. "Goodbye, Gunnar." "Goodbye, Aeliana," he replied, using only her common name. She stepped toward the portal but paused at its threshold, in a move that seemed almost impulsive, perhaps the most human gesture he had seen from her. She turned back and crossed the clearing to him in 3 quick strides. Before he could react, she placed her hand against his cheek, her touch cool and electric. "Thank you," she said, her eyes holding his for one intense moment. Then she was gone, striding back to the portal and passing through it without looking back. The portal collapsed in on itself with a sound like distant thunder, leaving the clearing empty save for the dappled sunlight through the trees and a lingering scent of ozone and something sweeter, something not of this world. Gunnar stood there for a long moment, the locket warm in his hand. Finally, he slipped the chain over his head, tucking the locket beneath his shirt where it rested against his chest. He didn't need to speak her name to feel its subtle presence, a connection to something beyond his world, to someone who had seen him not as a weapon or a resource, but as an equal. As he walked back to his cabin, the forest seemed different somehow, the same trees and rocks and sky, but with the knowledge that there was more to reality than what he'd been trained to see. He had a report to file, explanations to fabricate, a mission to conclude. The agency would be satisfied with some version of the truth that fit their understanding of the world. But the locket against his skin told a different story, one of realms beyond his own, of magic and duty and connections that defied explanation. And for the first time in years, Commander Dave, Gunnar White, felt something beyond duty stirring within him. Something that, like the locket itself, he would keep close to his heart. Act 2, Alpha. Chapter 5. Blood Bond. 6 months had passed since Aeliana's departure. The forest had cycled through seasons, summer heat giving way to autumn's chill. Gunnar had returned to his agency duties, but nothing felt the same. The world seemed duller somehow, as if seeing beyond its veil had permanently altered his perception. The locket remained against his chest, warm and constant. He had not used it, had not spoken her name, though his fingers often found their way to it during quiet moments. On this particular evening, Gunnar was deep in the forest, ostensibly investigating reports of unusual activity that matched the energy signatures from 6 months prior. In reality, he simply needed space from the agency's demands and questions he couldn't truthfully answer. The first sound that caught his attention was not the gunshot, but the unnatural silence that preceded it, a sudden void where forest sounds should have been. Then came the report, not the crack of a standard hunting rifle, but something higher, whining, almost musical in its deadliness. The howl that followed sent chills down Gunnar's spine, pain and rage and something else, something ancient, compressed into a single sound. Moving with practiced stealth, Gunnar navigated toward the disturbance. As he crested a ridge, he saw them in the valley below, a massive black wolf, its fur gleaming like polished obsidian even in the fading light, and a figure that at first glance appeared human. But no human moved that way. Too fluid, too precise. The hunter wore something resembling tactical gear, but with components Gunnar didn't recognize. Materials that seemed to absorb rather than reflect light. In his hands was a weapon unlike any Gunnar had seen, elongated and glowing faintly with blue-green energy. The wolf was cornered against a rock face, blood matting its left flank where the strange weapon had found its mark. Even wounded, the creature was magnificent, easily twice the size of the largest timber wolf, with intelligent yellow eyes that burned with an inner light. "Finally," the hunter said, his voice carrying unnaturally in the still air. "The last dire wolf. Your pelt will buy me passage to 7 realms." Gunnar assessed the situation rapidly. The wolf, despite its size and obvious power, was gravely injured. The hunter was advancing with practiced confidence, weapon raised for a killing shot. Something in Gunnar refused to allow this execution to proceed. Drawing his sidearm, Gunnar called out, "Federal agent! Drop your weapon!" The hunter turned, surprise momentarily registering on features that were almost human, but subtly wrong. Eyes too widely set, skin with a faint bluish undertone. "This is not your concern, human," the hunter replied, his accent impossible to place. "This creature is not of your realm. Walk away." In that moment, Gunnar made a decision that would forever alter his path. "I've dealt with things from other realms before," he said, weapon steady, "and I'm making this my concern." The hunter's expression shifted from surprise to calculation. Without warning, he swiveled and fired at Gunnar, not with the strange rifle, but with a smaller weapon that had appeared in his left hand. The energy blast caught Gunnar square in the chest, sending him flying backward against a tree trunk. Pain exploded through his body as he felt ribs crack on impact. Struggling to his feet, Gunnar fired 3 shots in rapid succession. One caught the hunter in the shoulder, causing him to stagger but not fall. The hunter laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Your weapons are primitive," he sneered, raising his primary weapon again. The hunter fired again. This time, Gunnar managed to dodge, but the blast still grazed his side, burning through clothing and flesh with searing intensity. Despite the agony, Gunnar maintained enough presence to return fire, emptying his magazine into the advancing hunter. The shots slowed but didn't stop the creature. Just as the hunter closed distance, weapon leveled for a killing blast, the massive black wolf somehow summoned the strength for one desperate lunge. Teeth like daggers sank into the hunter's weapon arm, the force of the impact driving both wolf and hunter to the ground. The hunter howled, an inhuman sound, and drove some kind of blade deep into the wolf's side. In response, the wolf clamped its jaws with even greater force, crushing bone and sinew. Gunnar dragged himself forward using his combat knife to drive it through the hunter's throat. Blue-black blood sprayed across his face as the creature convulsed, then went still. In the sudden silence, Gunnar became acutely aware of his own ragged breathing and the wolf's laboured pants. They had won, but at terrible cost. The wolf had collapsed beside the hunter's body, blood pouring from the wound in its side. The blade remained embedded there, glowing with the same eerie blue-green energy as the hunter's weapons. Whatever the technology or magic behind it, Gunnar recognized poison when he saw it. The wound edges were already blackening, spreading visibly across the wolf's dark fur. Gunnar wasn't in much better shape. The blast to his chest had done more than crack ribs. Each breath brought the copper taste of blood to his mouth, and his vision kept threatening to tunnel. The side wound burned with unnatural intensity, as if the energy weapon had left something behind, something that continued to consume flesh long after impact. With tremendous effort, Gunnar crawled to the wolf's side. The massive creature's yellow eyes found his. Intelligence and pain mingled in their depths. There was no fear there, only a strange recognition. as if they were meeting across a divide neither had known existed until this moment. "We're in trouble, big guy," Gunnar whispered, one hand resting on the wolf's massive shoulder. When he tried to stand, Gunnar's legs buckled. The cabin was at least 2 miles away. Neither of them would make it that far. The hunter's blade continued to pulse in the wolf's side, the blackness spreading with each heartbeat. Making a decision, Gunnar grasped the hilt and pulled it free, causing the wolf to growl in pain. The wolf's blood coated Gunnar's hands as he pressed against the wound, trying to stanch the flow. His own blood dripped steadily onto the wolf's dark fur where they touched. Something electric passed between them at the contact, a jolt of awareness, of connection that transcended the physical. For a brief moment, Gunnar felt what the wolf felt. Pain, certainly, but also curiosity, respect, and a deep, ancient loneliness that echoed his own. The feeling passed as quickly as it had come, leaving Gunnar gasping. The wolf's eyes had widened, suggesting it had experienced something similar. As darkness began to close in around his vision, Gunnar knew they were running out of time. Conventional help was miles away, and even if it weren't, what medical professional could treat wounds inflicted by weapons from another realm? With trembling fingers, Gunnar reached for the silver locket that hung against his chest. It pulsed with warmth, almost as if it sensed his need before he acknowledged it. "Never thought I'd use this so soon," he muttered to the wolf, who watched him with startling intensity despite its fading strength. Holding the locket tightly in his bloodied hand, Gunnar spoke the name Aeliana had whispered to him 6 months ago, her true elven name. 3 musical syllables that seemed to cut through the very fabric of reality. The locket blazed with sudden heat and light, illuminating the darkening forest in a silver glow. Whether it was blood loss or magic, Gunnar felt the world around him shift and blur. The last thing he saw before consciousness failed him were the wolf's intelligent eyes, and in them, a reflection of the portal beginning to form in the air above them. His final thought before darkness claimed him was that Aeliana might arrive in time to save the wolf, even if she was too late for him. Chapter 6. The Rescue. The forest clearing shimmered with silver light as reality itself parted. Aeliana Vale stepped through the rift between worlds, her staff already aglow with power. What she saw made her normally composed features tighten with concern. Gunnar lay unconscious, blood pooling beneath him, one hand still clutching the locket she had given him. Beside him, a massive dire wolf struggled for breath, its obsidian fur matted with blood that pulsed from a wound that gleamed with unnatural blue-green energy. Between them lay a body that was decidedly not human, though it wore the shape of one. Aeliana assessed the situation with the swift precision of centuries of Guardian training. She knelt first beside Gunnar, her fingers finding the pulse at his neck, weak, erratic, but present. The wound at his side bore the distinct signature of Feymetal weaponry, an alloy that continued to burn long after impact. His other injuries, while serious, were secondary to the spreading corruption from the energy weapon. "Gunnar!" she called, her voice carrying power beyond the mere sound. When he didn't respond, she placed her hand over his heart, sending a gentle surge of energy through him, enough to temporarily stabilize, not to heal. Moving to the dire wolf, she inhaled sharply. "A sentinel," she whispered, recognizing the ancient breed thought long extinct. The creature's yellow eyes flickered open at her touch, regarding her with unmistakable intelligence. The wound in its side mirrored Gunnar's, Feymetal poisoning, spreading rapidly. What caught her attention, however, was the strange resonance between them. Where their blood had mingled on the forest floor, it shimmered with an energy she recognized immediately. A bond was forming, unintentional perhaps, but no less powerful for it. "I will help you both," she promised, addressing the wolf directly. "But we must move quickly." With a gesture from her staff, she created a containment field around the hunter's body. It would need proper disposal, but that was a concern for later. Her priority now was saving the 2 lives fading before her. Creating a transportation portal back to Alfheim would be impossible. The energy required would kill Gunnar in his weakened state, and the Sentinel wolf would fare little better. The cabin, then. Gunnar's sanctuary where she had once healed. Aeliana wove intricate patterns in the air with her free hand, her staff glowing brighter as she gathered power. Unlike the dramatic portal she had used to return home, this spell was subtler. A short-range translocation, moving them just a few miles through space rather than between realms. "Hold fast," she murmured, though neither conscious victim could hear her. Light enveloped them, and the forest blurred around them. When it solidified again, they were inside Gunnar's cabin, Gunnar on his bed, and the massive wolf on the floor beside it. Aeliana immediately set to work. From within her robes, she withdrew small pouches of herbs and crystals, emergency supplies she had taken to carrying since her own injury months before. Working swiftly, she prepared 2 different poultices, one for a human, one for a dire wolf whose metabolism would process the medicine differently. As she worked, she spoke in the ancient elven tongue, words of binding and healing that helped focus her power. The fey metal poisoning was her primary concern. If it reached either heart, there would be no recovery. She applied the poultice to Gunnar's side first, her fingers gentle but firm as they pressed the mixture into the wound. He groaned but didn't wake, his breathing shallow. Next, she treated the wolf, who watched her with alert eyes despite its weakened state. The creature didn't growl or resist, somehow understanding her intent. With both poultices applied, Aeliana stood at the center of the room, raising her staff. The crystal inlays pulsed with gathering power as she began a complex incantation. This was no simple healing. She was attempting to neutralize foreign magic, a delicate and dangerous procedure. Light spread from her staff, filling the cabin with a soft blue glow. It settled over Gunnar and the wolf like a blanket, seeping into their wounds. Where it touched the poisoned areas, it hissed and steamed, drawing the corruption out like venom from a snake bite. Hours passed as Aeliana maintained the spell, sweat beading on her brow. The process couldn't be rushed. Attempting to force it would cause more harm than good. Finally, near dawn, the last of the Feymetal energy dissipated, leaving behind wounds that, while serious, were now simply physical rather than magical. Exhausted but focused, Aeliana turned to conventional healing. She cleaned and bandaged Gunnar's injuries, using some of her elven medicines to speed the process. His broken ribs were carefully bound, and a healing draught was eased between his lips. For the wolf, she prepared a different mixture, one designed for magical creatures whose healing abilities already outpaced mortals. As the sun rose, Aeliana finally allowed herself to rest, settling into the chair near the fireplace, where she had once recovered herself. The parallels were not lost on her. The guardian now the healer, the roles reversed. The wolf's yellow eyes remained on her, watchful but no longer wary. "You are the last of your kind," she said softly to the creature. "The Sentinels were guardians of the boundaries long before my people took up the mantle. I thought your line ended centuries ago." The wolf's ears pricked forward at her words. "And now you are bound to him," she continued, nodding toward Gunnar's sleeping form. "Not by choice, perhaps, but by blood and circumstance. Such bonds are rare and powerful." The wolf's gaze shifted to Gunnar, then back to her, as if in question. "Yes," she answered the unspoken inquiry. "He will live, as will you. But you are changed, both of you. The mingling of your blood, human and sentinel, has created something new." Rising despite her fatigue, Aeliana moved to check on Gunnar once more. His breathing had steadied, colour returning to his face. The locket still hung around his neck, now quiet and cool. She touched it briefly, feeling the connection it maintained between them. "You called and I came," she said quietly, though he couldn't hear. "As I always will." The wolf made a soft sound, drawing her attention. "He will need you," she told the creature. And you, him. The barriers between realms grow weaker. What began with ultranacious is spreading. This hunter was but a symptom of a greater disease. For 3 days, Aeliana maintained her vigil, tending to both patients as they slowly recovered. The wolf healed faster, as she had expected, though it made no attempt to leave. Instead, it positioned itself protectively near Gunner's bed, accepting food and medicine from Aeliana, but otherwise remaining focused on the unconscious man. On the 4th morning, Gunner finally opened his eyes. He blinked against the light, disoriented, then focused on Aeliana's face above him. "You came," he said, his voice rough from disuse. "You called," she replied simply. His eyes moved past her to the massive black wolf watching him from the foot of the bed. Recognition flickered in his gaze. "He made it," Gunner said with evident relief. "As did you, barely," Aeliana replied. The hunter wielded feimetile weapons. Even in Alfheim, such injuries would be considered grave. Gunner attempted to sit up, wincing as his body protested. What was he? Not human. "A realm walker," she explained, helping him adjust to a more comfortable position. "A mercenary who travels between worlds, hunting rare creatures for profit. The barriers between realms are weakening, allowing beings like him greater access to worlds once closed to them." "Like Earth," Gunner said, understanding immediately. "Yes, your world has been largely isolated, protected by natural boundaries, but those boundaries are eroding." Gunner's gaze returned to the wolf, who had risen and now approached the bedside cautiously. "And him? He's not from Earth either, is he?" "No," Aeliana confirmed. "He is a sentinel, a dire wolf of ancient lineage. His kind were guardians of the realm boundaries long before my people assumed the role. I believed them extinct for centuries." The wolf stopped beside the bed, its massive head level with Gunner's. Those intelligent yellow eyes studied him with an intensity that went beyond animal awareness. "There's something else," Gunner said, not asking. "Something happened between us." Aeliana nodded. "Your blood mingled with his as you both lay dying. Such mixtures occasionally create bonds, connections that transcend the physical. It is rare, especially between species, and rarer still between realms, but it has happened." "What kind of bond?" Gunner asked, his eyes never leaving the wolf's. "That remains to be seen," she answered. "It will develop in its own way, at its own pace. But you are connected now, your life force and his, intertwined." As if testing this, Gunner slowly raised his hand toward the wolf. Without hesitation, the massive creature pressed its muzzle against his palm. The connection was instant and electric. Not words precisely, but impressions, gratitude, respect, curiosity. "Alpha," Gunner said suddenly. The wolf's ears pricked forward, accepting the name as if it had always been his. "He needs a name," Gunner explained to Aeliana, "if we're going to be connected." She smiled slightly. "Alpha is fitting for a sentinel. They were always leaders among magical creatures." Gunner's hand moved to the thick fur of Alpha's neck, finding an anchor there as another wave of impressions washed over him, fragments of memory, sensations, emotions that weren't his own. "This will take some getting used to," he admitted. "For both of you," Aeliana agreed. "The bond will strengthen with time. You may eventually share thoughts, not just feelings. Some ancient texts speak of bonded pairs who could see through each other's eyes, share each other's strength." Alpha settled on the floor beside the bed, his massive form relaxed but vigilant. There was something regal in his bearing, despite his recent injuries. "Why was that hunter after him?" Gunner asked. "Sentinel pelts are valuable in certain black markets across the realms," Aeliana explained, her expression darkening. "They retain magical properties even after death. And, as the last of his kind, Alpha would be particularly prized." "The last," Gunner repeated, looking at the wolf with new understanding. They shared that now too. a kind of solitude, a uniqueness that separated them from others. You saved each other, Aeliana observed, and now you are bound to each other. Such things do not happen by chance. Gunnar's hand moved to the locket around his neck. And you saved us both, he said. Thank you. Aeliana inclined her head, accepting his gratitude with characteristic grace. The locket fulfilled its purpose. I am glad you used it. Will you stay? He asked, the question simple but weighted. For a time, she replied, until you are both fully recovered. Then I must return to my duties. The weakening boundaries require attention. Alpha made a soft sound, almost a huff, drawing both their gazes. I believe, Aeliana said with the hint of a smile, your new companion disagrees with my departure. Gunnar felt it too, a gentle pressure in his mind, not words but clear meaning nonetheless. Together stronger, pack protects. He thinks we should work together, Gunnar translated, surprised at how naturally it came to him. All of us. Aeliana considered this, her ancient eyes moving from man to wolf and back again. Perhaps he has the right of it, she said finally. The threats we face are growing. Allies are valuable, especially unusual ones. As if to confirm this, Alpha rose and moved to stand between them, creating a triangle of connection. Guardian, Commander, and Sentinel. 3 protectors from different worlds brought together by circumstance and choice. In that moment, something shifted in the cabin's atmosphere, a sense of purpose taking shape. This was more than recovery, more than a chance encounter. It was the beginning of something new, an alliance that none of them had sought, but all of them now recognized as necessary. The blood bond had joined Gunnar and Alpha, but a different kind of bond was forming among all 3 of them, one forged in shared danger and mutual respect, one that might just be strong enough to face whatever was weakening the boundaries between worlds.